My name is Michael Marshall. My firm, Michael Marshall Design, is architecture and branding and graphics interior design firm here in DC. I am African American and I am the CEO and design director of our practice. As a child, I was interested in drawing. It was the thing that I was pretty good at. I was much better at that than sports. So it allowed me to focus on drawing, and as young kids do, at least young boys, my focus was on drawing cartoons, from comic books to cars that were very prominent and special during that time. So drawing was my passion. And so once I learned of the profession of architecture, it became just the next step of going forward to finding something that I could do as a profession. I learned about the profession of architecture through a friend whose dad was a carpenter. And this was when I was 11 years old, and he showed me a set of drawings. We were playing one summer, and he showed me a set of drawings that he had to take because his dad forgot them, that was necessary to build the house that he was building as a carpenter. And so when I saw that, I asked what they were, and he said, "Oh, these are the drawings that an architect does so that my dad can build the house." And I said, "Oh, I like to draw, so maybe that's how and what I would be interested in." It's interesting as an African American in the profession of architecture. After I completed my time, my first 2 years of college at the University of the District of Columbia, I went to Catholic University. And at Catholic University, in my class, I was the only African American in the class. I think for me, I had gained great skills and great knowledge in technical drawings and drafting and model making at the University of the District of Columbia. So I had no problems fitting into the program at Catholic University, even as the only African American in that program. The same thing occurred when I went to Yale after finishing at Catholic University with a Bachelor of Science degree. I went to Yale for their master's program. And again, I was the only African American in the program at that time. And it had been 5 years, and this was 1980, 5 years before there were no African Americans in the architecture school at Yale at that time. Again, I was well prepared. I had no feeling of being a token for being there or being admitted because I was a minority. And again, I had all the skills in place, and it was an enjoyable experience being a student there. Well, it's interesting being a person of color in the profession of architecture because I see that we're able to come up with some of the nuances of how people will live together in our society, and especially in our urban environment, where in the next, I think, 25 to 30 years, 75% of the world's population will be in urban settings. And so we're going to have all of these people from different backgrounds coming together to live in that environment. And so as people of color, as architects and designers, urban planners, civil engineers, we're also there to help everyone, and especially minorities, fit in and feel comfortable finding the nuances of their culture and experience to make this urban experiment of all of us being together something that's successful. And it's important, I think, and I believe in this, that living in an urban experience where cultures come together and culture is spread and education is spread, that's going to be important moving forward in the future. I think diversity in our industry as architects and designers and planners is important because, again, of having different viewpoints and different understandings, because we are there as surrogates to help to make our environment hospitable and to make sure everyone has a voice. And if there's only one viewpoint that is really had, I think there's a missed opportunity in making a successful environment for everyone to be part of. So minorities will come in and have certain understandings and, as I said, nuances on what different cultures need and their respect, and how we can all sort of come together to make our environment successful. As an African American architect, I take a lot of time to get involved with minorities and young people that are interested in being an architect. I think it allows them to see that it's possible, well, first of all, to just introduce some of them to the idea of being an architect. Just as for me, I sort of found out in a haphazard way, but in a proactive way, we go out as a group. For instance, the National Organization of Minority Architects have students from inner city schools come into offices and to see what the practice is about. I take also students from universities, in particular University of District of Columbia, out to job sites so they can see how the architects fit in, and so they can see themselves fitting into this profession. So it's very important that we have that outreach. I think there's a big gap in diversity and a number of minorities in the profession of architecture and in universities. It's very, very expensive to go to school these days, and so the return on investment of your education dollars will be very important. So I think a lot of times there are other options out there for people who can afford to, or at least figure out how to get the funds to go to university. The profession of architecture does not have the return on the salaries that you get, especially when you first start, compared to being a lawyer or a doctor or someone with an MBA. And so I think that you really have to have the exposure and a certain passion about architecture and what it can do for your community. And really that's the real sort of value that I get out of it. And so it's important to me, and I think to other people that enter the profession, is what you can give back to society, more so than what you take out of it. Students in high school, and actually even junior high school, at least here in Washington, D.C., there are a number of outlets to be exposed to the profession of architecture. We're lucky to have the National Building Museum here in Washington, D.C., but I would think that there are other cities across the country that have different amenities like that, educational opportunities to see what it's like to be an architect, to be a developer, to be a planner, to be a civil engineer, and understand our built environment and to see that they can actually be part of that. So going to different events that discuss construction, discuss education, facilities, I think all of that is important. And so the different organizations, the American Institute of Architects, the different local chapters will reach out to the community to try to have young people explore the profession. My advice to young students of color who are interested in architecture, I think that it's important, for instance, in junior high and high school, to really understand history, because history is so tied, obviously, to architecture. You know, the expression of different cultures comes through their architecture and through their environment, through their art, through their music. So I would think history would be very important. Math is important, but more so if you're interested in being an engineer. But for me, the arts, drawing, sculpture, painting, filmmaking, photography, those sort of things I think are the type of things that students can get involved with and be exposed to architecture.